They didn't walk onto the stage with fancy clothes or famous names. Just worn sneakers, nervous smiles, and a beat playing in their heads. The judges expected a cute moment, nothing more. But the second the music dropped, these Filipino street kids didn't just rap. They told a story that would silence the room and change everything. Before the lights, before the cameras, before anyone ever called them talented, these boys belonged to the streets. Not in the way movies romanticize it, but in the way life demands it. The cracked sidewalks of Manila were their practice rooms. The noise of traffic was their background music. Every day, they carried a small speaker, a shared microphone, and a dream that felt too big for their age. They woke up early, not for school bells or alarm clocks, but for opportunity. A good corner with foot traffic. A busy intersection where people might pause for just a moment. Some days they earned enough coins to buy rice. Other days, only applause, and even that was rare. But they never stopped. Because rapping wasn't just music. It was their voice in a world that rarely listened. Each boy carried his own story. One had lost a parent and learned too early what hunger feels like. Another shared a single room with siblings, his verses written in his head while everyone slept. They didn't complain, they couldn't afford to. Instead, they poured everything into rhythm and rhyme, turning pain into poetry, fear into flow. They practiced kindness without realizing it. When one of them went hungry, another shared what little he had. When one forgot his lyrics, the others filled the gap. No egos. No spotlight battles. Just unity. On the streets, they learned that survival wasn't about being the best, it was about staying together. The Got Talent stage felt like another planet. Clean floors. Quiet air. Faces that judged before they listened. As they waited backstage, their hands trembled not from fear of failure, but from the weight of hope. This wasn't just their moment. It was for every kid still rapping under streetlights. For every child told their dreams were too loud, too bold, too impossible. They adjusted their borrowed clothes and worn sneakers. No stylists, no trainers. Just heart. One of them whispered a reminder they'd said 100 times before performing on the streets. No matter what happens, we rap for each other. That promise grounded them. When their names were called, they stepped forward not as victims, not as statistics, but as artists. They carried the streets with them. Every struggle. Every shared meal. Every kind stranger who ever stopped to listen. The stage was bigger. Yes, but so was the chance. And as they took their positions, the world saw kids with confidence. What it didn't see was the long road behind them paved with resilience, brotherhood, and quiet acts of kindness that shaped who they were long before the music began. The moment the boys stepped into the spotlight, the energy shifted not with excitement, but with hesitation. The audience leaned back in their seats. A few smiles appeared, polite and careful, the kind reserved for children who were expected to be cute, not powerful. Somewhere in the silence lived a quiet assumption: they're young, they'll try, it'll be sweet, nothing more. The judges exchanged quick glances. They had seen thousands of act singers, dancers, prodigies, who peaked early and faded fast. Kid rappers? That was risky. Rap demanded confidence, precision, presence. And confidence was something the world rarely gave to children who looked like these boys. The microphone felt heavier than it should have. One boy's fingers tightened around it, his knuckles turning pale. The lights were blinding, and the room felt too big, too quiet. From the stage, doubt was almost visible, hanging in the air. Like fog, it wasn't cruel, but it was powerful. Doubt never had to shout to be felt. In the crowd, a woman whispered to her friend, unsure whether to clap now or wait. A man crossed his arms, already deciding how long he'd pay attention. Even kindness, in that moment, came with limits. "Let's see what they can do," the room seemed to say, holding its breath, but not its belief. The boys felt it. They always did. The same look they'd seen on the streets when people walked past without stopping. The same pause before judgment. But something was different this time. On the street, silence meant being ignored. Here, silence meant they were being watched. For a split second, fear tried to win. One of them thought about the kids back home, watching on a cracked TV screen. Another thought about his mother, praying quietly that he wouldn't fail. Their hearts raced. This was the moment where many dreams folded under pressure. Then, one boy glanced to his side. Another nodded back. No words. Just understanding. They remembered why they started. Not for applause, not for approval, but because rap gave them dignity when the world gave them doubt. The beat hadn't even dropped yet, but a decision had already been made. We will not shrink. They stripped their backs, shoulders squared. Their fear didn't disappear, but it transformed. It became fuel. The kind born from being underestimated too many times. The kind that pushes kindness deeper and courage higher. The judges leaned forward slightly, sensing a shift they couldn't explain. The audience grew still. Something was coming, something real. In that fragile pause, before a single word was spoken, the boys claimed their space. And in doing so, they reminded everyone watching of a simple truth. Sometimes, the greatest courage isn't in being loud, it's in standing tall when the world expects you to be small. The beat dropped soft at first, almost cautious. A simple rhythm pulsing through the speakers, steady like a heartbeat. For a brief moment, nothing else moved. Then the first boy stepped forward and spoke his opening line, his voice clear, sharp, and unexpectedly strong. The room changed. His words weren't playful. They weren't rehearsed cliches. They carried weight. He rapped about waking up hungry, about watching his mother pretend she'd already eaten, about learning early that childhood doesn't wait for anyone. Each line landed with precision, not rushed, not shaky, confident, real. The second boy followed, his flow faster, eyes locked on the judges. He spoke of the streets that raised them, of nights lit by street lamps, and dreams louder than traffic. His voice cracked for just a second, not from fear, but from truth. Instead of weakening the performance, it strengthened it. The audience leaned in. This wasn't an act. This was life. Then came the third, voice smooth, controlled, full of swagger. But beneath the confidence was pain carefully shaped into poetry. He rapped about kindness, learned the hard way, sharing food when there wasn't enough, protecting each other from bullies, believing in brothers when no one else would. His words hit harder than any punchline. The judges' expressions shifted in real time. Smiles faded into focus. One judge's raised eyebrow lowered slowly. Another unconsciously nodded to the beat. They weren't evaluating anymore. Were listening? The audience felt it too. The quiet wasn't awkward now. It was respectful. Phones lowered. Whispers stopped. Every bar peeled back a layer of assumption the room had carried in. As the verse passed from one boy to the next, something powerful happened. They didn't compete for attention. They elevated each other. When one paused, another stepped in seamlessly. When one stumbled for half a beat, another covered it with a perfectly timed line. Brotherhood wasn't just part of the lyrics, it was the performance. Then came the chorus. All voices together. Loud, proud, unapologetic, They rapped about dignity, about being seen, about how kindness saved them when the world looked away. It wasn't flashy, it was honest. And honesty hit harder than any trick or stunt. A judge leaned forward, hands clasped. Another pressed lips together, fighting emotion. Someone in the audience wiped their eyes without realizing it. This was the turning point, the exact moment when talent stopped being the headline and humanity took over. The boys weren't asking for sympathy. They were offering perspective. By the final verse, the energy was electric. Not explosive, but deep. Heavy in the best way. When the last word echoed and the beat faded, there was a heartbeat of silence. Then the room erupted. Not because they were kids, not because it was surprising, but because something real had just been shared. In that moment, everyone understood. This wasn't about rap anymore. It was about voices that refused to stay. Quiet hand hearts that finally made the world listen. The applause didn't come right away. For a moment, the room was suspended in something heavier than silencer shared realization. The kind that settles in your chest before your hands remember to clap. The boys stood frozen, breathing hard. Unsure whether they had crossed the line between boldness and vulnerability. Then one judge stood. The chair slid back slowly, deliberately, as if the movement itself carried meaning. Another judge followed, then another. Within seconds, the entire panel was on its feet. The audience rose too, a wave of sound crashing. Forward, louder and longer than anything the boys had ever heard. The boys looked at each other, eyes wide. One of them smiled, another blinked rapidly, trying not to cry. This wasn't just applause, it was acceptance. When the room finally settled, one judge leaned into the microphone. His voice wasn't sharp or critical like it often was. It was quiet, respectful. He spoke about truth, the kind you can't fake. About how talent can impress, but honesty can change people. As he talked, his voice softened. He admitted he hadn't expected this. And that admission meant everything. Another judge followed, describing how the performance reminded her why she fell in love with music in the first place, not for fame, but for connection. She looked directly at the boys and thanked them. Not praised them, thanked them. The boys nodded, absorbing every word like oxygen. Then came the most unexpected moment. One judge asked them a simple question. Why do you rap? The smallest boy stepped forward. His hands trembled slightly as he held the mic. He paused, then spoke, not rapped. Because when we help each other, he said, voice shaking, we feel strong. The room fell silent again, but this time it was different. Softer, warmer, he continued, explaining how they shared food, how they practiced together so no one felt left behind, how they promised that if one of them succeeded, they all would. He wasn't performing now. He was offering his heart. A judge wiped his face, no longer hiding it. The audience clapped gently, almost protectively. In that moment, compassion became the climax. Not the talent, not the standing ovation, but the reminder that kindness learned in the hardest places be the greatest strength of all. The judges didn't just see performers anymore. They saw leaders, survivors, kids who had turned struggle into something generous instead of bitter. As the boys stood there, holding hands, the stage felt smaller and warmer. The world, for once, felt like it was meeting them halfway. And everyone watched and understood something profound. When children choose kindness over resentment, and unity over ego, they don't just entertain, they transform the room, the moment, and the people listening. Long after the lights dimmed and the applause faded into memory, The boys remained standing together, hands still linked, as if letting go might break the spell. The stage that once felt enormous, now felt intimate-like. A place that had listened, truly listened, and answered back with love. Backstage, away from the cameras, the boys finally exhaled. Laughter slipped out first, shaky and surprised, followed by tears they no longer tried to hide. They hugged each other tightly knit, in celebration of fame, but in relief. Relief that their voices had been heard. Relief that the truth they carried hadn't been too heavy for the world. One of them whispered, "We did it." Another replied, "No. We did it together." That sentence mattered more than any trophy ever could. Messages began pouring in, judges offering guidance, crew members offering encouragement, strangers offering belief. But the most important moment came quietly, when a staff member handed them a phone showing comments from viewers watching at home, kids from different countries, parents, teachers, people saying, "My child feels seen. You gave me hope. Thank you for reminding us what matters." For the first time, the boys understood something powerful. Their kindness had traveled farther than they ever could on foot. They thought about the streets, they came from the cracked pavement, the noise, the uncertainty. Those places hadn't disappeared, but now they looked different. Not smaller, just filled with possibility. They knew there were kids watching, who still wrapped under streetlights, still shared meals they barely had, still dreamed quietly because dreaming loudly felt dangerous. And now, those kids had proof. Proof that your beginning does not define your ending. Proof that kindness can grow in the hardest soil. Proof that unity can turn survival into strength. Before leaving, the boys stood in a circle, like they always did before performing. No cameras, no audience. Just them. They promised each other that no matter what came next, failure, success, or struggle, they would stay the same. They would help others the way they had helped each other. They would lift voices that hadn't been heard yet. Because swag, they realized, was never about attitude, it was about heart. As they walked out into the night, the world felt different. Not kinder yet, but closer. And sometimes, that's how change begins. Not with noise, not with power, but with children brave enough to be honest, generous enough to share their light, and united enough to remind us all of our humanity. And that is how little rappers with big swag left something behind that would echo far beyond the stage.